My grandmother always claimed her house was haunted, but when she spoke of it, there was no fear in her voice. Instead, there was joy. She'd say, "They're on the other side of the doors. If you listen closely, you can hear them." It wasn't the words of a woman scared of ghosts. It was as if she was fondly recalling old friends. She'd tell me stories about the spirits that had stayed behind in her house, and her eyes would light up, filled with longing and love. I remember asking her once, "So, they're not bad ghosts?" Too young to understand the complexities of good and evil, I wanted to know if they were something to fear. "No, sweetheart," she'd say. "They would never hurt you." I trusted her completely, though. At the time, I didn't understand how a person could live with spirits. But my grandmother did, and she seemed at peace with them. The house was old and my grandfather had passed away years ago. She often spoke of him, but also of other figures, people who might have been her parents or siblings. She would tell me that in the past, many people stayed home to die, surrounded by their loved ones, and that was why so many spirits lingered in the house. When my grandmother passed away at the age of 95, I was filled with sadness. I hadn't seen her in years, and I felt guilty for not visiting more often. Her will arrived a couple of weeks later, and to my surprise, everything was left to my mother, except for the house. The house was left to me. At the time, my fiancée, Alice, and I were just about to get married. We were expecting our first child, and it seemed like the perfect place to start our new life. We moved into the house about a month later, after refurbishing it with what little money we had left. But when we stepped inside, it was nothing like I remembered as a child. The warm, mystical aura was gone. Now it felt cold, eerie, and unsettling. The house creaked, and strange whispers filled the air, echoing behind every closed door. Alice noticed it too, and my mother still refused to visit. But despite all that, I couldn't shake the feeling that this house had been my grandmother's sanctuary. It had been a place of love for her, and I wanted to make it the same for our new family. The first few years were hopeful. Alice and I raised two children, Alex and Amanda, in that house. The lush green fields and vast forests surrounding the property seemed perfect for a family. It looked like we were building the happy life my grandmother had envisioned. But that happiness didn't last. On the 3rd of September, 2017, everything changed. My family was killed during a burglary that went horribly wrong. I woke up to the sound of glass shattering and strange noises. I grabbed a baseball bat to defend my family. But before I could even move, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. One of the intruders had stabbed me. I fell to the floor, unable to move, unable to breathe. I tried to scream for Alice, to warn her, but no sound came. I lay there helpless as the men attacked my wife and children. Somehow, I survived. The next thing I knew, I was in the hospital, gasping for air as they prepped me for surgery. I didn't know yet that my family had been killed. I still had hope. But that hope vanished when the police told me the grim truth. The intruders were drug addicts, high out of their minds and looking for anything they could sell. They attacked anyone they came across. The police had chased them down, and both were shot dead in the process. No closure, no explanation for why they targeted our house, no justice. The stab wound had damaged my spine, leaving me with limited use of my legs and left arm. It would take months of rehabilitation before I could even return home to an empty house. My mother wanted me to stay with her, but I couldn't. The house was the last place I had left to connect with my family. It was the only place where I still felt close to them, even though it was painful. I couldn't sleep in our old bedroom or go into the children's rooms. Instead, I stayed in the guest room, alone with my grief. The house, still filled with its strange sounds, was now more active. The creaks, the whispers, the howling wind. Those sounds I'd heard as a child had become clearer, more distinct. They were no longer just noises in the background of my life. Now they were voices calling to me. One night, 3 weeks after returning to the house, I woke up to the sound of someone singing. It was a beautiful, cheerful voice coming from our old bedroom. I knew that voice. It was Alice, the song she used to hum every morning as she got ready. It was a song her mother had taught her when she was a child. I rushed to the door, hoping to hear her voice again, to find her. But when I opened the door, the room was empty. The bed was made, The closet was full of clothes that would never be worn again. The voice had vanished, leaving me alone once again. I convinced myself it was just a dream, but the next night I heard Alex's laughter coming from his room. I rushed to his door, hoping against hope that he had somehow survived. But when I opened it, there was nothing. The room was dark and silent. The presence of my son was gone. I realized then that the spirits my grandmother had spoken of were real. They were the spirits of my family, still lingering in the house. I heard them at night, Alice's voice singing, Alex laughing, Amanda playing with her toys. They had all died, but now in some way, they were still here with me. The nights became a routine. I'd sleep during the day, and at night I'd sit by the doors of the rooms where my family had once lived, listening to them. I couldn't let go of them. They were all I had left. But then one night Alice's singing stopped. Instead, I woke to her screams. The same screams I had heard on the night of her death. I rushed to her room, but when I opened the door, the room was silent. The nightmare was replaying itself. I heard Alex's cries and then Amanda's. One by one, they died again, their screams echoing in my ears. In a desperate attempt to end the cycle, I began removing the doors from their hinges. But no matter what I did, the doors would always close at night, trapping me in the nightmare once again. Eventually, I removed all the doors except the bathroom and guest room doors. It worked for a time. I no longer had to listen to their deaths. But then one night, I heard something new. It was my own voice crying out, "I'm sorry, I couldn't save you." I didn't open the door. I couldn't. And then I heard a gunshot from the other side, followed by a quiet thump. I didn't know what to make of it. Was it my fate? Or was it something more sinister, something yet to come? I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, too terrified to move, until exhaustion and alcohol took me to the kitchen table, where I passed out. The next day I removed the last door, the guest room door, and now it's quiet, at least for now. I'm left with nothing but the silence of an empty house and the ghostly echoes of a life I can never get back. When I was 8, my life changed forever. My mother and I were in a car accident on a freezing January day. She lost control of our Toyota Camry, and it crashed into a ditch before catching fire. My mother managed to drag me out, but the damage was done. I suffered second and third degree burns on 50% of my body, including the worst damage to my limbs. My hands were amputated, and I spent the next 4 months at British Columbia Children's Hospital. The hospital became my second home, with doctors performing over 50 operations to save me. Visitors came often, but my mother wasn't among them. I knew she was struggling, and my father explained that it was too hard for her to see me in such pain. But despite her absence, I knew she loved me deeply. She sent me care packages, letters, and promised a party when I came home. When I finally returned, still in a wheelchair and covered in scars, Mum threw a party to celebrate. But beneath the smiles, I could see the toll the accident had taken on her. Her once vibrant beauty had faded, and she looked older than her 35 years. One night after the party, I woke up in pain. My skin itched, and I felt a deep ache in my amputated fingers. I couldn't call out for Mum, and the discomfort seemed unbearable. But then, from the shadows of my room, I sensed a presence. I saw a figure standing in the corner of the room, a little girl, no older than myself. Her body was deformed, the flesh melting off her body in heavy folds. She was bald, her skin blackened and raw in places, with huge cataract eyes and a mouth twisted in a permanent scream. I was terrified, but she raised a hand to her mouth, shushing me. With trembling hands, I turned on the lamp, and the girl shrank back from the light. But then, something incredible happened. Despite her horrifying appearance, she gently tucked me back into bed, smoothing my hair. She didn't speak, but there was a warmth and compassion in her eyes. Then she silently walked out of the room, leaving the door slightly open. I didn't tell anyone what I saw, not even Mum, as I didn't want to worry her. But I couldn't stop thinking about the little melting girl. Days later, I went back to school, and though my friends were happy to see me, I faced bullying. Some kids avoided me, and others were outright cruel about my appearance. During this time, Mum seemed more withdrawn than usual. She would often stare into space or hum to herself, and sometimes I caught her crying. I turned to find the little girl, unchanged, standing beside my bed. She still wore the same yellow t-shirt and pink shorts, and though her appearance was no less terrifying, I felt no fear. She handed me a tissue and wrote a note. Kids can be cruel. Her presence was comforting, and I poured out my insecurities, telling her how ugly I felt. She wrote back saying, "A few scars mean nothing. You are amazing." Confused, I asked her who she was, but she simply walked away, leaving me with more questions. I wondered if she was a ghost and what had happened to her. I told Mom about the girl, but she brushed it off, laughing nervously, clearly uncomfortable. Determined to understand more, I visited my father and Jenny. I asked him about Mum's past, knowing there was something I wasn't being told. After much hesitation, he told me about Mum's childhood. She had grown up with her twin sister Sarah in Saskatchewan until one fateful day when an arsonist set their barn on fire. Mum had survived, but Sarah didn't. The trauma of that day had broken Mum, and she never fully recovered. It was then that I realized the little girl I had been seeing, this deformed, melting figure, was Sarah. She was watching over me, just as she had always watched over Mum. Over the years, Sarah had been a guardian angel, protecting us both, despite her tragic fate. At 16, I had grown more confident, even though I still faced occasional bullying. One day I found myself in a confrontation with Rachel, one of the mean girls. After I hit her in self-defense, I found myself alone on the football field, cleaning up trash. Suddenly, Rachel and her friends approached me, taunting me. But before they could hurt me, the little girl appeared, her eyes filled with rage. Rachel and her friends fled, terrified. The girl helped me to my feet and walked me home, before disappearing once again. That night, I finally told Mom everything. She broke down in tears and confessed the truth. Sarah was her sister. Mum had kept it all hidden for years, but Sarah had been there all along, protecting me in her own way. I finally understood why Mum had been so distant and why she had been unable to deal with the trauma of the past. Now, years later, I have a successful career, a family and children of my own. I've grown strong and confident, and I no longer need Sarah's protection, but I'm forever grateful for the guardian angel who has watched over me all these years. When I was 13, thunderstorms terrified me, but hospitals terrified me even more. So when my parents went to visit my Nana, my mom's mother, I decided to stay home and face my fear of storms alone. Thaddeus, our 5-year-old Lhasa Apso, kept me company, and I thought we'd be okay. Mom hesitated in the doorway, asking me one last time if I was sure I didn't want to go. Dad was already waiting in the car, but she still lingered, her concern written on her face. "We'll be just a couple of hours," she said, handing me a beeper in case of emergency. Once they left, I watched them drive off, and the storm broke immediately. The first rumble of thunder had Thaddeus pressing himself against me, shaking with fear. I cuddled him close, trying to soothe him, but my own heart was racing. The sky was dark, and each flash of lightning made me jump. To distract both of us, I picked up a book and began reading aloud. It helped a bit. For a while, the storm became background noise, and Thaddeus settled down a little. But then the storm hit with full force, a bright flash of lightning followed by a deafening crack of thunder. Thaddeus yelped and scrambled off the bed, and I followed him, both of us rushing down the stairs to the kitchen. "I was hungry anyway," I grumbled, trying to mask my fear. But the truth was, I wasn't ready to face the storm alone. I flicked on every light as I passed through the hallway. I didn't want to feel so isolated. Thaddeus stuck close to my feet as I searched for something to snack on. The phone rang suddenly, breaking the silence, its shrill tone making my heart skip a beat. I looked at the phone. It rang only once and then stopped. I stared at it for a moment, confused. "It's just the phone," I whispered, trying to calm myself, and Thaddeus seemed to agree with a wag of his tail. I figured it was probably just a wrong number, so I went ahead and made a plate of tortilla chips with cheese, sharing a bit with Thaddeus. We headed to the living room to watch cartoons, hoping the loud TV would drown out the sound of the storm. But the phone rang again. This time I answered it. "Help!" I began to say, but before I could finish, the line went dead. Just the dial tone. I frowned and set the phone back down, brushing it off as bad weather messing with the lines. It happened, right? I kept trying to tell myself not to be afraid. The storm was bad, but I was safe. Still, every time the phone rang, I felt an uneasy pull in my chest. The ringing became a strange rhythm, echoing in the quiet house. The phone rang again just once, and I sat up, my eyes glued to the phone. I rubbed the back of my neck, feeling the hairs stand up. Then the lights flickered, and the phone rang once more. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping in. I excused it as a storm-induced glitch, but the ringing kept happening, and my sense of unease grew stronger. I started to feel paranoid. There was something about it, about the timing of the phone ringing just once, that didn't sit right. The next time it rang, the lights went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. I stood frozen for a second, then ran to the bathroom, where I could hear the storm rattling the windows. While washing my hands, I suddenly felt the cold grip of fear. The phone rang in the silence, and the sound echoed down the hall. I grabbed a flashlight from the junk drawer in the kitchen, my hands shaking as I held it tight. With the beam cutting through the dark, I started to make my way back to the living room to find Thaddeus. The storm outside roared louder, and each flash of lightning made me jump. I felt like I was being watched. I found Thaddeus sitting at the foot of the table, staring intently at the phone. I called his name softly, but he didn't move. The phone rang again, just once. The same eerie, sharp ring that seemed to echo in my bones. I quickly scooped up Thaddeus, desperate to get away from the phone. But then, there was a thump at the door. Someone was at the front door. The lock turned slowly, and the door began to swing open. My heart froze in my chest, and I screamed. "Hannah, Hannah, calm down," a familiar voice shouted. I stopped, breathless, and blinked. The figures standing in the doorway were dripping wet, shadowed by the storm. My parents. They had come home early, forced to come in through the front door since the power had been out. Relief washed over me, and I dropped the flashlight, running into my dad's arms. "What is it? What's wrong?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I opened my mouth to explain the strange phone calls, but I stopped when I saw their faces, red, puffy eyes and expressions of deep sorrow. Something was wrong. "Nana?" I whispered, and it was all I needed to ask. They held me tightly, confirming what I feared. Nana had passed away while they were away. She had been sick for a while, but they hadn't expected her to get worse so suddenly. As we stood in the doorway trying to process the grief, the phone rang again, just once. My whole body stiffened, and I turned slowly to look at it. Ma, too, froze, staring at the phone in disbelief. "Ma?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ma crossed the room slowly and sat down by the phone, staring at it. She was visibly shaken, her hands trembling. "It's been doing that for a while," she said quietly, almost to herself. Dad asked, "What? Ringing?" "Yeah, just on." Ma stopped mid-sentence, her voice thick with emotion. She turned the receiver in her hands and sighed. "After I moved out for the first time, I used to call Nana every weekend. And when I came home, I'd call just to let her know I was safe. I'd ring once, and she'd do the same." She ran her fingers gently along the receiver, her face softening. "She always knew, and she always called back to say she was safe too. She used to tell me, 'Got it, thank you, I love you.'" The phone rang again, just once. Ma picked up the receiver and dialed Nana's number for the last time. It rang once, just enough to say, "Got it. Thank you. I love you." After hanging up, the phone went silent. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside, everything felt still.